Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We're going to be sharing with you some of the recent outcomes of work that CIE has undertaken looking at bike share systems and ranking them in particular. Now, of course, there are many things that are helpful to know about bike share systems. Part of this ranking exercise that you'll hear about will talk about the importance of these different factors, and we'll be talking about how cities perform with bike share. I hear and I see that there's going to be around 250, 300 of you, but we've assembled also a very select group of experts who can talk about both the study, but their own experiences in this area. I'm sure that as you hear the presenters talking about their experience, you may have some questions about the study or questions about their own experiences. Please feel free to put those in the Q&A chat part of this webinar. That way we can view them and we'll have colleagues curating those and popping those up to the top. We'll be taking some clarifying questions at first after each presentation, and then we'll have a general Q&A at the end. Now, without further ado, I'd like to go into these presentations, these overview presentations that we'll be having. The first one will be from a colleague, a friend to cycling, Sebastian Schlebusch, who is also the head of market development at the newly joined Dott. He's also the vice chair of the CIE Bike Share Expert Group. The first time I met Sebastian was on a bicycle. I think every time I've seen him since then, he's been on a bicycle. I'm surprised that he even has feet, because he probably has two wheels in his spirit. He is a real friend of cycling, but also of micromobility, and has been pioneering within industry groups and within the companies that he's been working for a wider uptake of both shared mobility, of shared micromobility, and of shared bicycling in particular. Sebastian, as the chair of this working group, please feel free to give us the context for this study.
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. I'm very humbled to hear these warm words from you. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining this webinar. So very good to see lots of interest in bike sharing and shared micromobility. And yeah, so I'm just on behalf of the industry of the expert group of bike sharing, would like to introduce ourselves. And we have also some slides prepared. So maybe we just bring them onto the screen. Thank you very much. So for those who don't know who the expert group on bike sharing is, let me start quickly with an introduction. So we are the leading group of in the European bike sharing industry, operators, service providers, hardware manufacturers, but also organizations supporting our ecosystem. And we have established ourselves in 2019 at the Velocity in Dublin. And yeah, we're working hard to make bike sharing an essential part of the way we move in our cities. So next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So there we go. So bike sharing has gained a lot of attention, also in the European Union Cycling Declaration, and now it's really time to double down to ensure that the bike sharing sector contributes to the overarching goals of doubling cycling in Europe by 2030. And the benefits of bike sharing are very clear. It's an inclusive way. It gives affordable access to cycling to everyone, even those who can't afford to buy a bike. It helps cities moving away from private car use, supporting mode shift. It improves dramatically the air quality and public health in our cities. It reduces carbon emissions, congestions, and noise. But also it contributes to new jobs, new green jobs. It boosts the local economy. People on bicycles spend more than people in cars. It's ideal for trips up to 5 kilometers, which comprise the majority of the trips we take in our cities, especially then also in combination with public transport. It becomes a real asset in our mobility system. Also, and that's what we've seen during and after Corona, it's very fast to deploy, and it's creating green, attractive, and livable cities together with the right infrastructure. And last but not least, it's transforming the way we move, allowing cities to shift to such an inclusive and zero-emission urban mobility. And now we need to intensify our efforts and make a high-capacity bike-sharing system a reality in every city and region in Europe, an ecosystem of bike-sharing solutions. And we've therefore commissioned and funded the second version of this benchmarking report to help cities compare their performance of their bike-sharing ecosystem, of private systems, of public systems, of bike systems, of e-bike systems, so the whole ecosystem, to understand also how they can improve their ecosystem in the future. And that being said, I hand over to Kevin, who will present the key findings of this year's benchmarking report.
Very quickly, Kevin is the CEO of Cycling Industries Europe. He is the principal author of this report, has led this benchmarking exercise, as you heard, in his first and second edition. He, like Sebastian, like everyone, I think all of our panelists here is a friend to cycling. I know that Kevin has a large number of his own bikes. Sometimes he may share them, I'm not sure, but he's here to talk about commercially shared bikes. And so, Kevin, this is a remarkable piece of work that you've done. It's the second year running. It really allows cities to understand where they are and even more importantly, what they need to do to, as Sebastian said, up their game, bring up their bike sharing game. So, Kevin, can you give us an overview of the study, its findings, and some of the key takeaways that you have from that to share with our participants today?
Thanks very much, Philippe. For everybody, I'll encourage you to read the report, but let's give it the 10-minute highlight version. So you should see a screen, and I want to just pick up 3 words here. I want to pick up the words ambition, the wish to do more with bike sharing, data, content, things you can make decisions based on. But I want to start by emphasizing this process we call benchmarking, because I think what's very important, and we've learned as an industry, as a sector, is the kind of sharing element. And, to be honest, I am, cutting and pasting from Wikipedia and any number of other sources. But the key point about benchmarking is to link it to this word best practice and take away the threat of the data and actually talk about organizations working together to evaluate and to think like a peer group. And as a peer group, within any group, there's always someone who does someone better than you. You can dislike it if your big brother does something better than you or your little sister, but actually you have that culture where as humans, we kind of learn from each other. And benchmarking really emphasizes that collaboration and the element of planning by looking at what your peers do. And in this case, we've got a very useful group of cities to be a peer group. And it's exactly the same group as the previous study, because the European Union has targeted 2 particular groups of cities and mobility. One is the 100 climate neutral cities, where they have targets to be clearly, to be a mission and to be flagships and to be leaders. But also there are now something over 400 nominated nodes on the Trans-European Transport Network. And the key point is just words in the slide there. They all have to have what's called a SUMP, Strategic Urban Mobility Plan. They might call it something different in their own country, the kind of transport plan, but it's all about progress and setting targets and measuring things. And in there is an obligation not only to have a SUMP, but to report on it. And we're delighted our study actually picked up amazingly cities of population of 95 million people just in this group of 148. So we can definitely call it representative. And because we're talking mobility, what we're highlighting in this report, and we've highlighted our last version, is to bring bicycles as public transport in line with other public transport modes and in line with driving and in line with walking. Is the unifying measure is trips. How many trips do you make? How many trips do you substitute? And we really have here, and I use an example here of a mid-sized city in our table, 500,000 population. We simply know now what is the world-class performance level. What might be considered reasonable. And I can raise an eyebrow, as can you, and say, hey, I'm a 500,000 population city and I'm managing 400 trips a day. If you did that in public transport, you'd barely be running a single bus. And that's the failed ambition as opposed to great ambition, but we can actually measure this now. And by correlating with other parts of our study, we can even tell you now, how big does my fleet need to be at minimum? And there is a minimum threshold to be anywhere near the top tier. But in this city, it would be 2,500 bucks, which again, for those who know the kind of numbers some cities have got, that doesn't sound like many, but it makes a big difference. World-class city of this size would be looking at 6,000 plus bikes. And it's really well correlated. And I say you can pay public transport. No buses, no passengers. In this case, no bikes, no passengers. So we can really see that more correlation and set that as a benchmark even for this. So ambition, fed by data, and a benchmarking and sharing process. And now what we want to just look at for these next few minutes is, and who should I go to do my benchmarking? Which cities might guide me, might lead me, might give me an example to work from? A headline indicator, and I'm always struck by the shape of this graph last year, and this graph has actually got steeper, where the cities that really use bike sharing as public transport are almost pulling away from their peers. And of course, where am I? Everybody loves a league table. And look who's here. I'm delighted to say the top two cities are on this call. But we also got lots more data this year. We took a full year study rather than just a select few months, and we were able to see some significant new entrants into this space, which give us, again, confidence that this is a very rich sample of what you can achieve. But if you were anywhere in this table, if you are 61st in our table, you're probably not looking at the top 10, but maybe you're looking at 30th or 20th. And in this indicator this year, because it's now progressive, we can show a city like Stockholm that increased the number of trips to its citizens by 239%. Turku, 81%, Frankfurt, 100% increase. And that's quite exciting. And these are highlighted in this year's version, because if we're going to benchmark and work together, we're going to demonstrate progress. We certainly found in our correlations now an even closer relationship between number of bikes and number of trips this year. Last year, we saw a bit of a relationship with the utilization of the bikes, but it's clearer. Apart from one city, I have to say Lyon does extraordinary things with not many bikes, and that's something that other cities might look at because they get such a performance out of that smaller fleet. But genuinely speaking, if you're doing less than 50 bikes per 10,000 inhabitants, you're not going to have bikes, a bike share system. And it may seem a bit rude, but basically, frankly, if you're in that right-hand group of green, you haven't got a bike share system. You have some bikes. But let's not convince ourselves it's a bike share system. You have some bikes. And worryingly, we actually see some of that indication across countries where an entire country seems to be under-resourced this year. But there are, again, you will see some of those top cities, but you also see others with high numbers of bikes, Milan and Differdange, that actually got the bikes. So perhaps their benchmarking question is, how do we get more from these bikes? How do we go more into this space? And we'd certainly like to see those cities questioning, is it our pricing? Is it our utilization? Is it the system? Do we have enough variety? Do we have e-bikes? Do we have infrastructure? Because you want to answer those questions from this graph. Lastly, we drop back on the traditional indicator of bike sharing, which is trips per bike per day. And as you see, this year, I mean, cities as a lot in our top 10 have utilizations right down in nearly 50th place. Utilization might tell you whether your fleet's earning money and turning over process is well managed on the availability, but it's not delivering trips in quite the same way. So we begin increasingly step away from that as a guide. The guide tells you trips and bikes rather than trips per bike must be your key indicator. Again, there are people in our group who are getting very high utilizations, and I mentioned Lyon earlier on, but I do see that Bilbao and Barcelona are not in that top group. And we see for example, our first German cities, they get quite high utilizations, but they are nowhere near our top list of performers in overall trip delivery. So you start to extrapolate, move those things around, you get a lot of value. And just, I'll point you to the report, but also you'll find a very rich resource of other indicators. This year, our first national breakdown, semester improved, very powerful correlations that you can use to look at clusters of cities and other indicators like Dott and electrification, which are not delivering at high level. We have evidence this year that e-bikes are delivering to an extent, but not to the extent that would be dominant in the numbers. But I go back to benchmarking. Last thing I will say is that benchmarking works when you talk about it. And I really thank the bike sharing colleagues, the experts, who threw open these numbers at VeloCity, put 15 cities samples, and thanks to those cities for being very collaborative, and just worked on it for a couple of hours in a collaborative environment. If you take the city of Brussels region, they use some of our data to do a full and comprehensive independent study of their city to allow comparison and data with the data as a base, but it's all about the study. It's not about the data. So I come back to this. Ambition, data, benchmarking. Bit of fun. Brutally honest, every city has a chance to set targets. Every city can know how bike sharing contributes to your public transport mix. And you can do the calculation. You can then collaborate with your peers, with experts like us or independent people we can bring to your table to show how much benchmarking works for you and for how much bike sharing can do for your city. And if you're stuck, frankly, come back to us because we're here to help. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. That's fascinating. And I really like the way that you're able to drill down on some of these differentiating aspects between the performance and the benchmarks of different cities. As I said at the outset, if you have some clarifying questions, especially now, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A. As there is not one that I can see right now. Kevin, can I ask you something about stumps? See what I did there? And that is, you rightly point out the importance of sustainable urban mobility plans, but can you think of, from your experience going through these cities, are there cities that have done a really good job of integrating bike share into their sustainable urban mobility plan as a separate or as a full-on item that they'll be tackling? Or is it generally included within cycling more at large?
I would say, and I don't know if it's a coincidence, but you have to look, and actually when we look at the national data, that France is almost the national champion. And you maybe go back to
I'm not going to argue there.
Yeah, but France also, was the first country to conceptualize sumps and work. And I think the other advantage is organizational and governance terms of working as metropoles with a more strategic fit. And you do see more bike share schemes that reach across multiple municipalities. And so that scale, and I would make the comparison, go back to numbers. The average French city or metropole in our sample has 4 times more bikes than the average German metropole. 4 times. Yeah. It is inescapable that there is something different going on. Now, Belgium and others have individual cities that are very high, but there's a collective thing we're looking at there. So I do think there's something to say. I mean, I'm sure my French colleagues will kick me for saying, but France can do better. But it seems to be structural, and that is in itself quite interesting.
We do have a question from Mark Strong, and what he's asking is the methodology that you undertook for this benchmarking, is this something that's available to non-EU studies? And he's asking in particular a situation that you know quite well, how applicable would it be in the UK versus similarly sized EU cities?
It's nice to hear from Mark, who's actually an old benchmarking colleague from way back. So yes, is a matter. I mean, the indicators are not rocket science. We were fantastically supported by Philippe, who could independently gather, the data. But clearly, a city authority could run its own numbers or its own fleet, or speak to its operators and make at least a good estimate on these comparisons from its own numbers. Methodologically, yeah, you might want to work with a benchmarking expert or someone to kind of help you process that. But that's very much when you start to work with your peers and try and compare one city to another, that external facilitation can help. But certainly the raw data, talk to Flucto if you see if they've already got your city or they can get that information, or, you know, talk to us about where it came from.
Excellent. I see that some more questions coming in. We're going to circle around back to those questions after our presenters. We're going to, now that you've spoken a bit about France, shout out to France, we're going to turn to Natalia Cicciarello, who is the shared mobility manager for the City Hall in Paris, la Mairie de Paris. She's been working on issues relating to shared mobility since 2017. She is one of the people behind the revolution, the collective work that has led to a revolution, and a kind one, not a one characterized by beheadings, but more characterized by bicycles in the city of Lumière. And Natalia will be talking about how the city of Paris has really leveraged since 2008 bike sharing as a way of delivering on their sustainable mobility goals. I understand, Natalia, that you're in London. We won't hold it against you, but we look forward to hearing about Paris's experience. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello, Philippe, and hello, everyone. So I'm very pleased to be here. And well, as it was said before, of course, there are many things that have been done in, well, I will not talk about all cities in France, but it's true that there are ambitions that have been done for developing shared mobility. Shared bikes, it's been since a long time now. For example, in Paris, we have it's been in Paris, it's been 17 years that the city has been promoted shared bikes, because at the very beginning, if you can change the slide, there is a shared bike system, a public offer that has been since 2007. It was launched by the city, and today there are 56 cities taking part in what is called Philippe Métropole, which is I don't know if you can change the slide to get the other one. So well, but it means that there was a strong will in order to provide a shared bike system. Why? Maybe also, like, for those who know Paris is very dense, with 20,000 of inhabitants every square kilometers, and not only inhabitants, because we have a lot of tourists, of workers that are coming from the Paris region every day. So I mean, people don't have space in their houses to store bikes. So the idea to have a public service with bikes available everywhere in the street, well, was a real success. Besides, it's a subsidized system. For example, Paris subsidized every year like 2 million euros in order to contribute to this metropolitan service. For example, if you want to use a bike, this system is a lot used by commuters. Like more than 50% of people would use bike Philippe every day, almost every day. So it's like an access that you have every 300 meters. You have cheaper bike access when you're a student, or if you're older, or if you have lower income. And so everything is done to make the bike successful and to give the opportunity to use the bike to everyone. Of course, it's not the only, I would say, the clue to get that, but it was Philippe. I mean, Paris without Philippe, I cannot imagine it today. So it's really like maybe the metro today, the metro system. And by the way, as we know that to make changes in society, it's important to educate people as young as possible. The city of Paris, for example, subsidized 100% of the one of the offer of the Philippe offer for young people from 14 to 18 years old. So this is very interesting as well, to get used to the system. So we can, well, you have on the picture you have almost cities, they have the same kind of system. But well, this is important because it's very dense and you have bikes everywhere. Maybe we can change the slide. And of course, well, there was like a difficult period for Philippe when the operator changed the contract, and in 2017 we had the first private bike operators who arrived, because, well, people were used to cycle and there was a real need to give people some opportunity to move in the city with bikes. So it was quite late, according to other cities I know in Europe. And well, today I would say that we only have e-bikes, like private offer, because it's true, it's difficult to compete with just regular bikes with a system so performant and so cheap as Philippe. For users. So today we have e-bikes provided by private operators, and it's a good complement to what exists for the public offer. Now we have launched a tender that's now going on, so we will have the new operators deploying their fleets by summer of 2025. So it will take a little bit of time because, well, we have some criteria selection for these new operators. And the thing is that what is good of this offer is that they provide like a premium offer or some alternative bikes, more bikes everywhere, and maybe it's more interesting. We are not that hard user as someone who would commute with these bikes. We can change the slide. What we see today, but maybe you have already in other information, we had like almost 58 million trips done with shared bikes in 2023. So it means like 160,000 trips per day in Paris. And and I read last week that 20% of bikes, trip made by bike, but this is in the region of Paris, they are done with shared bikes. So this is important to say, because it's quite a lot, and it's an opportunity for people who don't own a bike to make a trip with a bike. So here you can see the different data according to trips that were done. So we see that it's always in progress. And we see as well on the picture on the right, August 2023, where e-scooters contract ended, and so the fleet bike would just doubled or even more, and we see as well that how much more trips were done from that date. So the space that was given before to e-scooters was replaced for e-bikes, so we can see as well the increase of trips done by bike from that date. So, well, I think it was quite an interesting experience for Paris, promoting active mobility and, well, working in that way.
Thank you, Natalia. We have a question from Giulia in Venezia, in Mestre, Venezia, and her question is, in your experience with shared bikes, but more largely shared mobility in Paris, what are some of the key leverage that led to behavior change, to people actually using shared bikes much more than they had in the past? It's something they're struggling with. I think a lot of other cities are also struggling with this. What can shared bikes do? What specifically can shared bikes do to change behavior, to help contribute to behavior change? And keeping in mind that in Venice itself, there aren't going to be a whole lot of bikes, but we're talking more about Mestre on the land side of Venice. And what advice would you give her from Paris?
Well, what we see that more visible you make offers on the street, more people would use them. So maybe it's important to make recognizable system with a good access. I mean, you have the metro at 10 minutes walking distance, maybe it's good to have a bike spot at 2 minutes walking distance from your place, for example. So it's always the first alternative for the user to start a trip. Of course, well, subsidizing if you want to have as more people as you can, and well, if you're talking about it and talking about interesting things, and we know for changing behavior for mobility is quite difficult, so it's always important, the financial issue. And besides, we know that people who would use bike share, they do it because it's quicker and it's nicer. So it's very nice to, well, you can see the city, you can have a nicer approach, but of course you have to be performant and the trip has to be quick. Otherwise, you will not take it. I mean, if you need to commute or to do something functional.
I've looked at what has happened in Paris, and one of the things that strikes me is that, to paraphrase the American author Ernest Hemingway, change happens quite slowly, and then it happens extremely fast. And I think that's one thing that we can see in Paris since 1992. There have been a number of initiatives to increase the number of car-free days, to put in place a network. And all of a sudden, we have this moment with COVID where everything was already in place, but things could accelerate. And I think that preparatory work can't be ignored, and that's something fundamental that a lot of cities have to understand, that there is some hard work to do to get to the point where you can change fast.
Of course, sorry, I haven't mentioned, but of course, Paris has been creating bike lanes since the beginning of the years 2000. But of course, we had 2 big bike plans from 2014, where you really see the increase of secure bike lanes, because it's very important to provide people security and a safe way to get where they want to go. So the objective of Paris is to be a cycling street, to have every street where you can cycle by 2026. So even if you're a child or if you're elder people, so we hope we are in the good way.
We're going to move from Paris, a large city, a metropolis, where there is a lot of renewed interest and increase in cycling, including shared cycling since 2008 and dockless since 2017. We're going to move to a city slightly north of there, Antwerp in Belgium, a city where there is a lot of everyday cycling, where most people get around, or many people get around by bicycle, and many trips are already by bicycle. And on top of that, there's still room for shared cycling. I'm going to ask our friend from Antwerp, the coordinator of Smart Ways to Antwerp, Michiel Penne, to describe how in the city of Antwerp, a city where there's already so much cycling, what does shared cycling bring to the mobility mix? And in particular, answer it from your experience helping manage Smart Ways to Antwerp, which is this multimodal way of addressing reducing car dependency, increasing choices for people to travel, that covers the digital aspects, the physical aspects, and the behavioral aspects. Michiel, what does a city where cycling is already popular gain from bike share?
Right. Thanks for having me here, and thanks for the introduction. So, yeah, I'm very proud to see in the report that Antwerp has so much daily trips with shared bicycles. We were #2 in the top ranked cities, and I can say that for the use of public bikes in Antwerp, we're still on the rise. So it's still going up. And by the way, cycling in general is the most popular mode of transport for inhabitants of the city of Antwerp. So to maybe tell you a bit about how it looks like, we have 2 shared bicycle systems in our city. We have the station-based system Velo with non-electrical bicycles, which is active in the city itself since 2011. On the picture here, you can see the bicycles, the Velo bicycles. And there's also Donkey Republic, which is mostly electrical shared bicycles. It can be found not only in the city itself, but in the whole transport region of Antwerp. So as you can see, it's like red and white Velo bicycles, and they are really loved by inhabitants and visitors of our city. I think they became iconic in the past 13 years, and we can call Velo a real love brand. And I think that's rather unique in mobility. And as I heard about Paris before, about Philippe, I also can't imagine Antwerp without Velo. And I think it's a combination of elements that makes Velo so successful and loved by users, despite the fact that indeed we have so much people in and around Antwerp owning a bike themselves. So to begin with, Velo is very affordable for users. A yearly subscription, it's only 58 euros for unlimited rides of maximum 30 minutes. And next to that, Velo is very convenient for users. And this might also answer a bit a question from Venice about behavioral change. So we think that users can choose the transport mode they take. So for example, they can take our Velo when the sun shines, but the tram or bus to come back when it started raining. Or with Velo, also, they don't have to be worried about vandalism or theft, which is important. And the Velo stations are located conveniently close to each other, so there's always a station nearby. At important mobility hubs, for example, Antwerp Central Station, the Velo station is located right in front of the entrance, so it's very convenient to put your bicycle there and then enter our station. And also the city of Antwerp is very actively investing in cycling infrastructure, and also giving information to people. With our Smart Ways to Antwerp route planner, people can check routes, including all kinds of shared mobility, for example, our Velo system or Donkey Republic bicycles. Because we're also happy to see the number of Donkey Republic users going up, we know that a modal shift is needed, not only for the city itself, but also for the region around our city. And we believe that electrical bicycles make it a lot easier to cycle longer distances or to cycle in this region around our city. And I'm just giving a quick overview, but to conclude, I would also like to point out that the concession that the city of Antwerp has with Clear Channel for the Velo system will end in 2027. So we see this as an opportunity to make our shared bicycle system even better. Soon, we will launch a request for information to the market to see how providers look at the future of bike sharing for a city like Antwerp. So we want this new or updated system to be at least as successful in terms of usage as the existing Velo network. It has to fit well in our public domain without visual clutter. It has to stay affordable for our users. We want to keep the iconic Velo brand and the look and feel the system has today. And also it's important that the system impacts the modal shift in the city of Antwerp and the region around the city. So we would also like to see the options of a shared bicycle system that facilitates longer trips and a system that integrates well with the existing public transport. If there are providers here who feel that they can play a role together with us, with the city of Antwerp, to continue the success story of Velo after 2027, please reach out to me so I can inform you once this request for information is published. And so, this was it for us, for Antwerp.
Thank you, Michiel. I'm sure that your email box is going to be exploding after this. Listen, one of the things that strikes me about Antwerp is not only that it's a city with already a high level of active mobility, walking and cycling, but it's also one that welcomes so many different kinds of shared bikes. So you have Velo, you've got Cargaroo with cargo bikes, you have Donkey Republic with essentially electric bikes. And so somewhere there's this question of how do you coordinate in this background? And I know that Antwerp has been a leader in publicly guided mobility as a service frameworks. So can you tell us a bit about shared bikes and that kind of digital service that brings together all these mobility offers? Has it been something in Antwerp's success story that has contributed to the popularity of these services?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I can say a lot about mobility as a service success stories, because I think also for Antwerp, still they can develop when it comes to mobility as a service providers being active. Certainly B2C, I think B2B it works well. B2C, there is still a lot that can improve. But we also believe that mobility as a service has to play a role when it comes to these shared mobility options. So that's why if a new provider becomes active in Antwerp, a new shared bicycle provider or e-scooter or whatever, if they become active in Antwerp, they share their data with us. So we can share it in our route planner, and we can also use it to follow up the agreements we made in terms of where the bicycles or the vehicles can be put, but also they have to share their data with mobility as a service providers. So we ask it of these providers because we believe this is a way to make sure this ecosystem works better.
And it is an ecosystem, and that's what I find particularly interesting in Antwerp, is this holistic approach to the entire ecosystem. We'll come back to some questions for Antwerp afterwards. We're going to round off this first set of presentations with a presentation from Keji Dunmo. She is a policy officer at DG Move. Prior to that, she was at DG Research and Innovation. At DG Move, she has had her hands deep in the work around the cycling declaration and some other projects. Can I just say, as I do to all the people who have worked on the cycling declaration, thank you for your service. It's a tremendous document, and it's a really lighthouse document for Europe going forward. So I'd like to hear from the Commission side, or from the EU side. How do you view both the possibilities for the EU to leverage shared mobility, and what the EU gains from shared bicycling in particular, and how do you integrate that into the work that you're doing, not just in the follow-up to the cycling declaration, but for example also in the Social Climate Fund and some other opportunities that the EU has to offer to member countries?
Thank you very much, Philippe, for the nice introduction. It's been a pleasure for me to take over this. This was the very first file that I took over when I joined DG Move, so it was a really exciting journey, and it is paying off. I feel that the introduction that was given at the beginning from Sebastian and from Kevin already said it all. Why is it important? So I don't think I need to go back to explain why it is important to have a European declaration on cycling. It was indeed for us a great opportunity. It's a joint political framework. It's a very special type of document because it's co-signed by Parliament, by Commission, and by Council. And it is really addressing the whole cycling infrastructure, and it's meant to boost more and better cycling across Europe and to guide future action. So that's why we have converged together on 8 main principles and 36 ambitious commitments that you see. Well, you see the principles there. I'm sure if you have not read it yet, here there is a QR code for downloading it. You can go through it and have a look at it. And of course, it is important. I mean, cycling, and we're talking today about bike sharing, share mobility in general. For us, of course, looking at urban mobility framework, this is important because we put it in the backbone of mobility, sustainable urban mobility, public transport, together with share mobility and active modes and new mobility services, of course, to help moving forward towards a more sustainable environment. And bike sharing, it is referenced in the declaration multiple times when talking about, for example, improving security at bike parking spaces. That includes also bike sharing. When we talk about industry and high quality job and the development of a world-class European cycling industry, there of course we refer to also bike sharing, and as well in supporting multimodality. Cycling tourism, for example, we talk about as well the importance of supporting bike sharing schemes. So it is a part, of course, of the declaration. It was indeed quite an achievement to have it signed, but of course now it needs to be turned into commitments, need to be turned into action. And this has to happen at different level, at all the levels of governance. It's not only at EU level, but of course national, regional, and local. And that's why we want to work together to turn this into a reality. So you know that we are now in a phase of transition, of course, politically speaking, but that doesn't prevent us from going on with our work. We have already activities in the pipeline that, at least for the moment, keep us busy. One of them, for example, we started working already on what you see there, the last principle, which is about data. we have opened just before the summer a call for tender with the idea to improve the collection of data on cycling. We know already the situation at this moment is not harmonized across member states, where we want to work on creating a baseline for measuring cycling infrastructure and its use across Europe. If we want to double the number of kilometers, or double anyway the cycling infrastructure in Europe, we need to know what is the current situation. We are working closely with the colleagues from Eurostat, and we hope to have this dedicated study starting before the end of this year already. Kevin mentioned it a bit at the beginning, the revision of the TEN-T regulation. There will be work there as well related to urban mobility indicators next year, so that will also feed into this work around data. We have heard the call from member states to help them, to support them, to facilitate their coordination and dialogue, to exchange best practices, to really work together on what are the main points to improve the work around cycling. So what we are trying to do as well is to facilitate this coordination. We have asked recently member states to appoint a contact person, a cycling coordinator that we can liaise with, so that we can set up this dialogue together, and we hope to be able to start as soon as possible. And we are planning already to report back on the progress from the launch of the declaration and the latest developments already in a year time, so October 2025, during the next Urban Mobility Days, where we would like to dedicate one full day to that, to the implementation of the cycling declaration. So we have put in motion several things, many others as well, but okay, to be brief, let's say, to give you the main highlights. I think this was already a small overview. And what's coming as well, opportunities that we shouldn't underestimate. If you can go to the next slide, I wanted just to give you a little heads up regarding the Social Climate Fund. This is an opportunity that will come soon available. So the Social Climate Fund regulation was adopted already a year ago, and it is related to addressing the social impacts of the impacts arising from the new emission trading system for buildings and road transport. So it addresses both energy and transport, and is particularly targeted towards vulnerable groups in Europe. So those affected by energy poverty and transport poverty. Energy poverty is a concept that is better, let's say, known, and there are already measures that can address transport poverty. Is a bit more complicated to address. It's multifaceted. There are several layers around that. This fund will start operating from 2026. And as you can see there is a sizable amount of resources dedicated to that. It will work based on social climate plans. The member states will start preparing, or are started already preparing, and will have to submit by mid next year. So a lot of work is ongoing. You can go already to the next slide. Why am I mentioning that? Because among, of course, the transport part, the measures and investments that can be supported is, of course, provide access to zero and low emission vehicles and bicycles. So here there could be measures that can support subsidies, for example, to purchase bicycles, e-bikes and cargo bikes, infrastructure for recharging and refueling and development of second-hand zero-emission vehicles market. But also, if you go to the next slide, we also see as eligible the use of affordable and accessible public transport in connection as well with shared mobility. So, for example, some of the actions could be transport vouchers, but also shared mobility vouchers, but also on-demand transport services. And you can see there as well among possible measures that can cover mobility on demand, shared mobility services, and active mobility options. So this is, of course, relevant as well for the context of bike sharing. There can be let's say many type of measures and actions that could be supported. There is guidance coming, being prepared and coming to support the member states to prepare these plans. The work are ongoing. Member states will have to consult widely, involving also local and regional authorities in the preparation of these plans. And we have collected already quite a good number of examples and good practices that are online, also through the expert group on urban mobility, also thanks to the contribution of CIE, which is part of this group as well, together with many other stakeholders. And these are available also on the webpage of the Social Climate Fund. So these are good examples and practices that can be used and supported as well to give member states some ideas on how they could be integrated in their social climate plans. As I mentioned, this work is ongoing. More guidance, more information is coming, but it's indeed an opportunity. Considering the amounts available there, it's an opportunity that should not be underestimated. So keep following this file and keep engaged. And if you see indeed this consultation coming in your member states, get engaged and reach out to the national government, because this is indeed quite helpful. I will stop here because I think I abused my 5 minutes. I think I went longer, so I will shut up now. Thank you.
Well, Kiji, any kind of talk that comes with the promise of money behind it is always welcome. And so I think the summary there is, of course, not just watch the space, but get engaged in this space. There are a lot of opportunities coming up, and these will help leverage even more bicycle sharing in Europe. We have not a whole lot of time left. There are 2 or 3 questions we have. I'm going to turn to them immediately, and then I'll have a quick round of questions at the end. Early on, a person in the audience asked if CIE or if those looking at benchmarking bike share systems are collecting information on coverage, on the actual costs of the systems, how long are the average rides. The question was, does CIE include this? And I think both Kevin and Sebastian have some answers to that. So how detailed is the information that you're gathering, and how usefully can that be used by people?
We had additional content that we should try to cross-reference, but the basic data feeds we get not enough cities could give us, for example, distances traveled, and we would like to see more cities making that kind of data available. We've begun to take a look at financial, but financial is enormously complex because it's mixing public and private funding, much of which is covered by confidentiality, and even we're bound as a trade association by competition law not to make observations about one person's business model versus another. So it increasingly gets harder, but I have to say, having run, at one point, I think we ran about 30 different scatter correlations on city size, population, electrification. It's not enough sort of homogeneous commonality between different cities and between their systems to really draw strong conclusions, other than you need to talk about it. And you need to say, okay, so my city's flat, my city's big, my city's got 1 million people. How do we talk? So for example, we did publish the small cities analysis. So why don't a group of small cities get together and say, how do we make bike share viable in a small city? But I would say to the questioner, it's not obvious at the data level. It has to be done at the practitioner level and at the city sponsor level, where you begin to work on it as a group, and you need to benchmark. And therefore, the offer is there to perhaps even look at facilitation to try and help you do that.
Yep. Sebastian, any additional input on that?
Yes, maybe to add a few words to that. I think we see a general trend of more data being available, of more data sets becoming more and more harmonized. And that's a good trend because it helps every one of us to make data-driven objective decisions, and not driven by political sentiments, but rather really looking at the real impact here. And we as an industry, not only within CIE, but also the friends from our auxiliary services, the scooter services. So we complement each other in the shared micromobility, in the shared mobility space. No? And we also continue more and more to work together on making data available for the benefit of our partner cities, but also for the benefit of us as an industry to get the right infrastructure, to get the right decisions for an enabling ecosystem, enabling certain frameworks that help us to flourish, but that also help us to help our cities. It's a give and take, and we all need to work very closely together.
We have a question from our friend Georgios in Greece, and he's pointing out that, at least in Greece, but I know in other places, bicycle sharing systems have been deployed without any substantial hard separated bicycle infrastructure. And so his question, are there other examples where that has been the case? And if so, how have those cities been successful, if they have been successful at all? I'll take the moderator's prerogative to say that we do see this in a number of places around the world. And the one thing I would keep on the table is that one of the most essential pieces of infrastructure is the hidden infrastructure of speed management. And so even if you don't have hard built infrastructure, if you manage speeds to safe levels, then that already goes a long way to encourage people to cycle more often. But let's hear from the cities, from Paris and from Antwerp, and then also from the industry, from both Kevin and Sebastian, on your feeling about infrastructure first, and what do cities do when they roll out bike sharing before infrastructure. So Paris, so Natalia and Michiel.
So by infrastructure, I understand that you mean the whole secure bike lanes.
I'm assuming that's what he meant. Yes, what Georgios meant. Yeah.
Well, actually, they have to be together. Everything should be like an ecosystem to develop bike sharing. Well, not only bike sharing, but using bike. Bike sharing should be like an alternative, as I would say, like to do any trip for people who don't own a bike or don't want to own a bike. And when you have a dense areas, and maybe one day we'll have so many bikes that we will need to, I don't know, try to dissuade people to leave their bike on the street. So, but for example, in Paris, there were like 150 million invested during the first bike plan, and then the second plan from 2021 till 2026, the city invested 2,050 million for making infrastructure. So it's not just bike lanes, but also well, it's also education. It's also teaching lessons for young people. There's a lot of things in order to do that. I would add as well that it's important to invest in public transportation. And as I'm working also on station-based round-trip car sharing, it's also important to develop this kind of car sharing station-based for specific trips that people would need to continue to do outside the city, and that would really replace your car. I mean, it's difficult sometimes to say, okay, we will be promoting bikes by developing car share, but it's necessary if we want people to change to bikes for daily trips, and well, and to promote that. So there are many things I would say that are taking part in the ecosystem.
Michiel, anything to add to what Natalia said?
No, also I think that infrastructure is important, of course. If you need to let more people cycling, it's good to have infrastructure. It's also a network thinking. So in Antwerp, we're really working on certain points which are not, you know, which are a bit dangerous at this moment. We're trying to fix it. But the whole network has this good quality to it. But at this point in Antwerp, we're having a capacity problem where we see more and more people cycling, and the cycle lanes are not always, you know, big enough. Certainly when you look at different speeds, people going sometimes very fast compared to other people. So yeah, I think we're now looking more at for example, safety concerns there. But yeah, working on infrastructure, for us, it was the first thing we started doing.
Sebastian and Kevin?
I would say, sorry, Sebastian, go first.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we can also complement this view from our rider surveys and the insights we get from the consumers, that the number one barrier to use bike and scooter sharing systems is either the lack of safe infrastructure or the perceived lack of safe infrastructure. So there might be an infrastructure everybody considers as, from a planning side, from an administrative side, as a good piece of infrastructure, but then when you're actually asking the users, is it really perceived as safe? And what is very important for us as an industry, we need to grow beyond the usual suspects as users. Yeah, we need to make bike sharing available for everyone, also for those who are not very confident in cycling every day. And that really requires to have to overcome this safety gap and this perception gap here.
I would say bike share consistently surprises us. It can take roots in cities that seem quite unwelcoming. And I go back to the early Paris schemes. Philippe was a quite big scheme before the Paris Master Plan. I look at London, I look at Dublin, cities that haven't had perhaps the best reputation for being infrastructure-led. And there seems to be even a chicken and egg thing going on, where the bike share scheme is an icebreaker for political support, which can lead to infrastructure going forward. Ultimately, I agree with the colleagues. The big numbers come when you have a population that is highly visible, but there's a known critical mass syndrome in cycling, and in dense urban cores where many bike share schemes have started. Clearly, traffic can be heavily constrained, traffic is extremely slow, and the cyclist risk is perceived as lower. But to break out, I would agree they go hand in hand. But bike share is remarkable as a kind of icebreaker, opinion former in cycling. And for that, it's to be, I think, and for the companies and cities that led the way, it's to be championed. It has done remarkable things.
Bike share is remarkable. I think those are a good summing up, a few words to sum up this work. It's not a sum up of the work that is in the report, so I really encourage you to go into more detail about the benchmark. And in particular, you see there's a wide number of cities, wide different levels of practice, and I encourage you to see those cities that are just above you, maybe a bit more ahead of you, and feel free to contact them. Go through CIE, go through ECF, go through other networks, and ask them, well, what did you do to get to that point? What is that increment that would allow me to get to that point? Sebastian, at the very outset, you set out a number of things that cycling is good for. You left out one thing, though, and that's going to be my round robin question in the few seconds that we have left. I am consistently surprised to see how many people are smiling on a bicycle. Biking is fun. So my question to you, and I'll start with you, Keji, when was the last time you smiled on a bicycle?
Yesterday.
Sebastian, when was the last time you smiled on a bicycle?
Also yesterday afternoon, yes.
What were people doing this morning? Kevin, when was the last time you smiled on a bicycle?
I'm going to grab this morning.
This morning. Michiel, when was the last time that you smiled on a bicycle?
This morning when I was bringing my children to school with a cargo bike. And
Excellent.
by the way, we even have numbers in which we see that people cycling are the happiest commuters. So in Antwerp, we know it's like that.
Natalia, when was the last time you smiled on a bicycle?
Yesterday as well, because today.
What can I say? Shared bicycling is remarkable. Cycling is remarkable. It contributes to so many outcomes, and yet there's so much yet to do. Please look at this study. Please look at the lessons. Reach out to your colleagues, reach out to your peers, reach out to CIE, and see how we can next grow this so that next year we see even more cities in that top tier level. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for your questions. And thank you so much for your continued support to this and other work that CIE and we all put out.